Welcome to In Great Company. This is the podcast where we explore how thriving businesses build relationships at scale. Hosted by Sindhu Srivastav and Danielle Tourette, we sit down with top executives to uncover the strategies that create stronger connections, engage teams, and lasting success. Let's dive in.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to In Great Company, the podcast where we uncover how thriving businesses build relationships that drive revenue and real results. I'm Sindhu Srivastav, the CEO of We Crush Events and We Crush AI.
And hello, I'm Danielle Tourette, CRO here at We Crush. Together, we sit down with leaders who prove that connection isn't a soft skill, it's a business strategy. The companies that invest in people and purpose consistently outperform those that don't. And this episode is brought to you by We Crush Events, your ultimate partner in corporate event planning. At We Crush Events, we do just that, crush events. We know that a company's event is a reflection of its brand, and we're here to make sure it's nothing short of perfect. Whether you need help sourcing vendors or full-scale, all-hands-on-deck approach, our expert team has the skills and connections to bring your vision to life. And the best part, there are no planning or production fees, just seamless, stress-free event execution. Make your next event unforgettable. Contact us at www.wecrushevents.com.
Today, we're driving into a conversation about money, values, and trust. Our guest is Doug Heske, founder and CEO of Newday Financial Technologies and founder of the Causeway platform. Doug and his team are tackling one of the biggest financial shifts in history, $84 trillion of wealth transfer from baby boomers to millennials and Gen Z. These are next generation investors, especially women inheriting health, because they want their money to create change, not just returns. And Doug is the pioneer of impact investing. Welcome, Doug.
Sindhu, thank you very much. Danielle, great to see you as well. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course. But here's the problem. Even when people deeply want to align with values, it's really hard. From hidden fossil fuels and retirement accounts to unregulated ESG labels to opaque charities, most investors can't be sure their dollars are actually working for the causes that they care about.
And Doug is changing that. With Newday and its new platform, Causeway, he's creating a participatory impact ecosystem that unites investing, giving, and community action, all backed by transparent data. It's all about building trust and showing measurable outcomes.
And at its core, Causeway turns connection into ROI by helping nonprofits convert donors into long-term investors and giving investors proof their money is creating real impact. Doug is proving that relationships are not just nice to have, they're the engine of both financial returns and lasting change.
So again, Doug, welcome to In Great Company.
Thank you.
That's awesome. So yeah, Doug, we'll start with your origin story. Okay, so we'll start at the beginning. You've dedicated so much of your career to aligning money with mission. Was there a defining moment where you realized finance could and should be used as a force for good?
Well, that's a great question, and I would say that the root of my engagement really comes back to my childhood. I grew up in a household where I had a very strong mother, a strong grandmother, and understood very quickly the power of strong leadership in our household. And they were both incredibly, I would say, strong leaders relative to community engagement. My grandfather was also the head of a community bank back in the small community in Connecticut where I grew up. And I can remember as a young man walking around the town, and I was often approached by people that knew my grandfather, and they would say, "Are you Al Heske's son?" And I said, "No, I'm his grandson." And that was oftentimes followed up by a strong handshake and a pat on the back. And there are expressions of gratitude for what my great grandfather did during really, really hard times. And so this idea of giving back to the communities in which you are living and operating in was something that was core to my interest level and my passion as somebody that was early on in growing a career. And I started my career in New York City, was transferred to Denver, Colorado, and then to San Francisco. But in all of those communities, knew the importance of getting involved.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and to chime in on that, love to hear about all those powerhouse women in your house. Sindhu and I love that. I guess along the way in your journey, what kind of personal philosophy has guided you as you've built your career in this space?
I think the core of that really has much to do with authenticity and, like we've all been talking about, giving back. And you made this comment early on around the importance of organizations that demonstrate that they're building what I would describe as contingent assets as opposed to liabilities that are created as a result of great behavior. And we, as an institutional asset management organization, are very fond of this idea around identification of great companies. What do great companies do? Great companies build a long-lasting impact on the communities in which they're living and operating in. They also generate extraordinary wealth for their shareholders, and they think very consciously about behavioral issues. Historically, many of those issues being defined as environmental governance and social standards that they build within those organizations, as opposed to organizations that may be building what we define as contingent liabilities. So an organization can cut back on its health and welfare programs, but the long-term impacts of that are that they have an employee base that is ends up being less committed to the organization. They can cut back on their customer service, and the same impacts are felt by their customer base as well. And so those are things that are not necessarily easily described, or certainly not described in a company's balance sheet or profit and loss statements. But the fact of the matter is that organizations that demonstrate this kind of behavior over the long term significantly outperform those that don't.
Yeah, no, Doug, thank you so much for sharing that. That's actually like really meaningful to hear, because one of the things that I'm hearing is this strong interest in giving back, right? And as you know, most public companies, they have a fiduciary duty to do best by the shareholders, right? Um, in my view, I went to Wharton for an MBA, so I'm saying this as a Wharton grad who understands her finance pretty well. I think in that fiduciary duty, what many companies are missing is the long-term return on investment. And I'll take what you just said one step further, right? If you have a workforce that's predominantly anxious about their health, about their family's health, about what they're going to do in the future, how are you expecting an anxious person to show up and do the best work of their lives?
There's no question about that. And I think for a lot of corporate organizations today, both public and private, there's an absence of culture that exists at these companies as opposed to where were a number of years ago. I spent more than 13 years of my career at an organization by the name of Piper Jaffray, which is now Piper Sandler. And that organization was more than 40% owned by the employees themselves. They were enormous supporters of the work that we were doing in the community as employees and as business leaders as a part of the organization as well. The cultural aspects of organizations that do that are critically important. This is also one of the things that we're trying to address in the Causeway platform through a mechanism to create culture, a mechanism whereby individuals and institutions can contribute both philanthropic capital and investment capital to the causes that they care most about that
Yeah.
are aligned with their underlying values.
No, I completely agree, right? Like, I mean, I think to the average Joe on the street, they hear culture and they're like, man, here goes like another fluff word. Right? I mean, here goes like another money sink. And really, like, I'll go back to Wharton because I feel like, Wharton in many ways is the underbed of that kind of thinking. And many of my classmates actually looked at this class called Total Leadership. You can actually go and listen to my interview with the Wharton professor who taught Total Leadership. And it changed my life, right? Like, I mean, his class changed my life and nobody took his class because they were like, that's a fluff class, right? I mean, you had to be really intelligent to take it. And for me, many people are missing the financial underpinning of that investment. Because I'm like, if you really open your eyes and look at the churn, the turnover, the toxic work environments most of our corporations have, like, to me, culture is what mitigates that. So if you think of having a toxic workplace actually has a financial P&L impact because there's inefficiency in how the costs are driving revenue, like, that's what, like, I think what you're getting at is culture kind of is the antidote to that. So it's not like culture for the sake of culture, it's culture for the sake of your P&L.
Yeah, and that culture has much to do with what has been this traditional framework for environmental, social, and governance investing.
Yeah.
And culture between employees, or the culture that you build with employees and the relationship that they have with your customers, the relationship that they have with leaders of the organization is critically important. But there are other really important aspects of this as well. And in our own investment process, we start with governance and we start with this idea of transparency. And you can look back over the last decade or so and find lots of examples of organizations that were failing from a governance perspective.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Absolutely. So, what you're going for is long term PI. All right. So, I know that many of our viewers might not have heard of Newday Impact Investing, Newday Financial Technologies. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Newday does and how Causeway fits into the picture?
For sure, Sindhu. And maybe I can start with a little bit of a story
Yes, we
that
love
will lend,
stories.
I think, a direct understanding as to not just what is the work that we do, but why we do it as well. So our organization is about 9 years old, and we have spent the last 8 years serving a number of very large family offices and foundations.
Mm.
And in the beginning of our history, we had a conversation with a principal of an organization, a large family, that shared this story with us around the experience that they had with the head of the family office. And this is an organization or a family that gives millions of dollars back to organizations like the Sierra Club and other environmental and conservation organizations that uh, work to support preservation of forest habitats and things like that.
Yeah.
So he came into the office and spoke with the head of the family office, talking about this idea that they were giving millions of dollars to the Sierra Club, while simultaneously they were invested in organizations like Weyerhaeuser and Boise Cascade and other organizations that are clear cutting forests in the Pacific Northwest. And he asked the question, how does this sync? So oftentimes investors make deliberate decisions and well-meaning decisions into organizations that are, from their vantage point, good companies. And at the same time, they're contributing capital to the causes that they care about that are totally out of alignment. So one of the things that we do as an organization, and this was the catalyst for the formation of this organization, is make sure that we're aligning those interests.
Yeah.
The big change for us really comes as a result of a discussion that we had with a major San Francisco Bay Area philanthropist that said, Doug, I've given millions of dollars away each year to ocean health. And sitting here today, I really have no understanding as to whether or not I've really made a difference on the preservation of our ocean habitats. And we began thinking, well, that should not be the case. So we need to figure out a solution for that. And we need to figure out a solution that doesn't just give opportunities for ultra high net worth individuals and families to participate, but virtually anyone, any individual and institution anywhere in the world. And that was the catalyst for the formation of Causeway. So as you had described earlier, Causeway is a participatory impact realization platform that you can do a number of things that are all mechanisms for engagement in the issues that you care most about around learning and education, which we refer to as getting informed, around the actual engagement piece, like how do you adopt behaviors in your life whereby you can support those issues that you care most about, that we brand under getting involved. And the last is a capital deployment decision for both philanthropic capital and investment capital in what are six underlying really important impact pillars that are climate action, air quality, water quality, biodiversity and conservation, regeneration and sustainable soil, and lastly, human equity. And of course, all of those things are intersection. You can't talk about one without having an impact on the other. So we give an opportunity in a frictionless experience for somebody on a web application, in iOS through the Apple Store, or on Android through the Google Play Store, to download an application that allows them to align their interests and allows them to make contributed capital in small ways into a set of organizations, nonprofit organizations that we have vetted. Those organizations range from organizations like the Jane Goodall Institute, who, of course, sadly has been in the news this week because of Jane's passing, and smaller organizations like Savimbo, which is an organization that's based in South America that is working with indigenous populations and doing amazing, amazing work unlike anybody else is doing today.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. Danielle, you have the next question.
Yeah. So impact investing is sometimes kind of dismissed or written off as feel good investing that can compromise returns. How do you counter that perception and show that values based portfolios can drive strong financial performance?
The lexicon used in this business can be very confusing, and everything sort of gets dumped into this category of impact investing. And there are a whole bunch of different varieties that sort of fall under that broad category.
Mhm.
So it all used to be known as socially responsible investing, ESG investing, most recently has been an important part of it. Um, Pure impact investing is really about dedicating capital to specific impact projects that generate a return, an impact return, and a financial return for the investor. So our approach is really unique and a bit different from a lot of organizations. And if you think about our ability as a society to drive change, it comes from a variety of different mechanisms. Of course, philanthropic capital is a really, really important part of this because there are thousands of nonprofit organizations that depend upon donor capital to do the on the ground work that they and only they can do from an environmental and social perspective. And now we have 57 of those organizations that are on the Causeway platform.
Oh, wow.
Public investment capital is also critically important, but people don't normally think about that as a mechanism for impact. And normally it's not, unless a public equity investor is using their shareholder voice to drive change in those organizations through advocacy efforts. And that historically has been the core of the work that Newday has done. We like to say that capital plus advocacy equals change, but in the absence of the advocacy piece, it doesn't. The public equity markets are enormous, more than $100 trillion in size on a global level. The private investment markets are also critically important, and that represents about 10% of the size of the public marketplace. And then lastly, in an area that few people talk about, it all has to do with consumer behavior, because you can direct as much capital as you possibly can to really innovative organizations and public companies that are both good actors and bad actors. However, unless you change the way that individuals are behaving in society, nothing else really makes a difference. And the challenge today, particularly as it relates to as it relates to climate action is that there's a parity, and that is that human beings don't normally think about their small carbon footprints as having a meaningful impact on climate. But the fact of the matter is today, particularly given where we are with the acceleration of climate change, the time is now for each and every person to have some level of participation in this. And it doesn't have to be universal every day, but everybody needs to do something. And so if it means hopping on your bike or, walking down the street as opposed to taking your car, um, that's one alternative. If it means shutting off the lights in your home, in aggregate, all of that becomes really, really important to driving change. So the more direct answer to your question is that when Newday thinks about impact investing and driving change, it is a combination of all of those things. We have brought the first three pieces of that to bear through the Causeway platform. So individuals can make donations directly to our set of nonprofit organizations that are distinguished and unique. Individuals can make capital investments into a set of asset allocation models that embrace public companies. We are doing an extraordinary amount of public communication through the platform and outside of the platform in partnership with our impact partners around the educational piece that over time will drive consumer sentiment and consumer behavior. The last piece for us is introducing opportunities to fund capital into private opportunities, which we're going to tackle in 2026.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So, Doug, I really want to think about the average Joe on the street, right? Myself, which is I'm super busy and I do really well when somebody gives me a piece of paper that's at the fifth grade reading level, right? I go through this really quickly and I'm like, got it. Okay. So, for somebody like that, and also understanding that right now, if you look at most average US households, they care a lot about affordability. And affordability is also kind of wealth generation. So if you're like, hey, I'm struggling to put my kid in daycare because I can't bloody afford the daycare bill. And now you're asking me about, to worry about the consumer choices that I make or whatever. What would you say to that person? What would you I'm literally struggling for my everyday life. How can I make a difference? You can say shut off your light, shut off your water, fantastic. But I want more than that. I want to be investing my money so I can one day afford the childcare. So how would I go about living my life such that I'm set up for better?
Yeah. Everybody has agency, right? And you make a
Yes.
very good point because there are a lot of challenges, particularly given the circumstance that we're in the United States today, given this enormous level of wealth disparity. And one of the things that when we were building the Causeway platform is that we wanted to make it incredibly easy for people,
Mm,
easy to understand, easy to use, easy to access for really, really low dollar amounts. So somebody can literally come in today that doesn't necessarily think of themselves as a philanthropist or a giver of charitable capital. And then they can make a meaningful gift as low as $5 into any one of those organizations. And more importantly, understand the dollar pathways to impact that $5 has.
mm,
Even on the investment side, oftentimes the big bulge bracket institutions and the regional investment banks and brokerages won't take an account unless it's a six-figure account. So somebody can come into the Causeway platform and invest in asset allocation models for as low as $1,000.
mm, mm.
So our hope is that over time we can bring that number down lower.
Yeah.
It is. Um, a really, really important part of what we're doing on Causeway is the education and learning piece. If somebody comes in and downloads the application, they can do that free of charge, set up a username and password. They can get informed and involved, and they don't have to spend a nickel on a donation or an investment.
Yeah.
But they can
Yeah.
learn a lot,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
can learn about where they can have impact in a meaningful way.
Okay, so going back to average Joe on the street, myself, I'll raise my hand and be like, okay, you know what? I'm struggling to pay daycare. $5 is like one Starbucks coffee. Thank you very much. I much rather go buy myself my Starbucks coffee than donate, whatever, fine. But the investing piece is pretty interesting to me because now you're telling me that it's not a donation, but it's an investment, which means now I'm expecting returns, right? So
That's
tell me, so exactly. So the investment piece is that I give you the $1,000, and that $1,000 is going to grow over time, is going to gain compound interest. So not only will that $1,000 grow, but the interest on that will gain interest, and therefore that'll compound as well, right? So
That's great.
now, okay, so get that. Now, what I'm really interested in is this, which is why would I not take my $1,000 and say go to a Vanguard and buy like whatever a VOX or a VIT or one of those really foundational things that most people invest in? Like, why would I come to Newday or Causeway and give you the $1,000?
For several really, really important reasons. So, number one,
Yeah.
um, we want customers, clients that are on the Causeway platform to think about their capital as a tool for change. Okay. Number two, what was really important to us and our clients is that they understand the pathways for impact.
Mm.
That if they're contributing capital to a nonprofit organization, they're not confused about the impact that that $5 is having. If they're making an investment into a portfolio or an asset allocation model as an example that supports gender equity or human equity in general, they understand exactly, okay, why that money that they contributed into that portfolio is making a difference. And we are explaining that via the communication that we're delivering through the platform. So if somebody goes to a Vanguard, they get a financial statement at the end of a quarter, minimally, and an annual statement from the organization, and it's all about financial returns. When somebody goes to Newday Causeway, they get a financial statement at the end of each quarter and an impact statement aggregated into one.
Mm.
And so this idea of connecting what is an emotional quotient associated with the investment decision and the philanthropic decision is absolutely critical as we continue to build this universe of people that care on a global scale that are a part of Causeway.
Got it. So get the value proposition, which is you're giving money, you'll get a return because it's all over the long term, right? Like nobody can predict like what's going to happen next year, but over the long term, you'll usually generate a return. And at the same time, you'll also understand your impact. In terms of the returns the portfolios themselves have been returning, like how do they compare with the average stock market returns?
So historically speaking, the portfolios that have been run at Newday have outperformed their respective benchmark. Now, a
Yes.
benchmark for your audience is something like the S&P 500 stock index, the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Most of the portfolios that we run are global portfolios, so we benchmark against the ACWI, which is the MSCI All Country World Index, which is an index that evaluates market performance on a global level. The other thing that I'd like to share, and this is something that's very, very important to our investors, is that at the end of the year, a customer can make a decision to allocate any percentage of their annual earnings back to a single nonprofit of their choice, to a group of nonprofits, or to a cause that they care about, but may not necessarily understand how to direct that capital to a nonprofit. So we do that for them.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Makes a ton of sense. So I'm hearing two things. One is that if you're confused about you, because a lot of people, like, I think, a large percentage of Americans, they don't invest in the stock market. So, and then there are multiple reasons, from we don't know how to get there, or we don't know what to pick, and it's so confusing. What you're saying is, by the way, we really care a lot about community, society, equity, all of the things that make our world better. And by the way, when you invest in one of our portfolios, on average, we've done better than the indexes of return that are out there. And therefore, like, why, like, if you had to, if you literally had to start, like, why wouldn't you start here versus whatever, going into a decision paralysis, because there is no need for a decision paralysis here.
Yes, and the other thing that I would share with you is that we have the benefit of capturing what are somewhat unusual perspectives from our set of more than 57 nonprofit partners that are most familiar with the on the ground work that's going on in a particular impact pillar, whether that, is a Philippe Cousteau who supports ocean health, a Jane Goodall Institute focused on conservation. And there are few, if any, other organizations that are incorporating that work into their investment analysis, number one. And number two, no other organization that has created this set of formal, deep relationships, partnerships with these organizations that are recognized on the global stage. And the other important piece of this for clients is that when they're connected to a particular impact issue, um, our impact partners are out front and center. Like, we have done countless events around the country with our impact partners. We just did one in New York City during Climate Week with 10 women leaders that are supporting the important work and role of women in changing impact on the global stage, which is critically important because we cannot meet the United Nations goals without having, particularly in the global south, more women leaders at the table.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll tell you this, like, DT and I both are women leaders, and we will tell you that we're supremely talented. And that,
Humble.
I mean, I don't know about humble, but whatever. Like, that's not one of my goals anyway. So I'm like, but we've, like, built a company that we're very proud of, right? And, like, I and my message to the general world, like, I loved your word agency, because it's not like things were handed down to either of us. Like, both of us, like, DT will tell you how she was pounding the pavement in heels, and I will tell you about my small town Indian roots and not having money to buy my flight ticket to the US, right? Like, I mean, and even though I had a scholarship on the other side. So it's agency. It doesn't matter kind of like what your environment is. I mean, you could start from negative, like myself, like full family debt or whatever, and you can build your way to mainstream success with my fifth grade reading capacity. So it's like, it's that, and that's what we're hoping to make, like, make available to the general world, like, make known. So I really love that.
Yeah, I should share one additional story with you. So, my partner and I were down at the National Book Festival in Washington, D.C. last month. And there was an author that spoke about a recent book that she had written that was on the bestsellers list, whereby, and they're historical fiction pieces, most of the things that she does, but she tells these stories of these unknown women that were a part of major buildings around the world, like at the Louvre and all, and the list goes on and on. And she made this statement that really resonated with me, that she said, I write these stories because oftentimes so much of history has been told by men, and the stories of women leaders are lost as a result.
Yeah.
And so it was the catalyst for us bringing together this group of women in New York City for Climate Week so that we made sure that their stories were heard,
Yeah.
acknowledged and recorded.
Oh, completely. Why do you think we're doing this podcast? I'm like, show me the
Yeah.
hill. Show me the building. I'm going to get on top of it and scream.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, yeah, DT, anything to add there, man?
Well, I want to ask, because this is a new concept for me, so I'm enthralled and trying to understand this, and I'm thinking about the individual investor. You said, I guess I'm curious to dumb it down for me here. You said you send the quarterly statements, they get the financial updates. What kind of information are they getting, I guess, specifically about the organizations? Like how much access to education do they get?
A lot. So let me unpack that for just a moment. So, of course, the big part of impact is about storytelling. And we do a lot of storytelling that I'll describe in just a moment for you what we do with our impact partners. So, in that statement, we share with a customer how did they perform from a financial perspective over the quarter. And in each one of our portfolios, there are about 60 to 70 underlying companies. Now, these are companies that are strong stewards for environmental and social concerns. They're organizations that are doing really, really good work as public companies. Not to say that they're perfect, because there's no such thing as a public organization that is perfect, especially when they're large organizations. One of the things that we try to do as an organization is identify those areas whereby they need to improve and then work with those organizations to get them to improve.
Mm.
Um, the second piece of it is around this idea that we're going to share specific metrics around the performance of those organizations align with those 6 impact pillars and how they're performing, both negatively and positively, so that we have basically what is a scorecard on those organizations. And that scorecard is used in working with those organizations to get them to improve.
And this is publicly traded companies, so it's not like they can go and hide somewhere and nobody knows about you. These are public equities. Equities is another name for stocks, right? So
Right, right.
Yeah, they are all public equities today, and we have a data and analytical team that is literally screening thousands of global organizations. And thank God for artificial intelligence. We are beginning to incorporate aspects of AI and machine learning into our investment analysis, and that gets stronger every month, which we're really happy about. But
yeah.
screening 3,000 companies is hard to do when you think about the number of key performance indicators that we're looking at. So, as an example, related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, that we're screening more than 70 individual factors that those organizations um, should be deploying, in their policies and practices.
Yeah.
The
And
next
you're sharing that with investors, what that criteria is.
we're sharing that with the investors on a select basis, on a quarterly basis, because we're giving highlights. And one of the things that we didn't want this to become is a homework assignment for people.
Yeah.
Everybody is extraordinarily busy today, but we wanted to give some examples of companies that were doing things right and some companies that needed to improve as well. We do a more comprehensive report at year end for all of those companies. The next aspect of the impact reporting has to do with the relationship that we have with the nonprofit organizations and the work that they're doing to address what is the underlying impact pillar. The reason that that becomes important is that many of our clients are making donations into those organizations, both small and large. So it's important for them to understand the dollar pathways of the charitable capital that they're giving. In addition to that, Newday as an organization is contributing a percentage of its revenues back to those same organizations and consequently having an impact on their organizations and on the impact pillar that's a part of that. So we have what is a very advanced, both top down and bottom up, qualitative and quantitative driven analysis process for organizations that we use in this selection process that we use to bring companies into the portfolio and divest of companies that are not in the portfolio.
Okay. So okay, you've described a lot. Like I essentially I get the theory. I get like the framework for investment. What I'm like really curious about now, Doug, is like how does the rubber meet the road? So if you could paint like one example of an unexpected connection that in traditional finance would have just never appeared, and you were like, man, that was a home run.
Oh my God, there's so many things that
Okay, pick your
uh,
best and just like make it so tangible so people like there's no way you can ignore the impact of it.
well, if I may, and please feel free to edit any of this out, I'm going to share two stories. So, what's
Yes,
very
yes.
much top of mind for me this month is the fact that about 60 days ago, we hired a leader into this organization, a woman by the name of Betsy Mosseter, who had more than 27 years of experience in impact investing, who is now Newday Investing's new president and CEO. And it was important for us to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. And so Betsy is an extraordinary person. I have had the opportunity to know her for a number of years. And it was really important for us that we made the decision to bring a qualified business leader into the organization, but not just a qualified business leader that was a woman.
Mm.
And the reason for that is that unless you're more deliberate in making those decisions, I don't think that the circumstances that we're in right now related to allocation of capital to women-owned businesses, getting more women into executive ranks ever changes because you just continue to meet the status quo.
Yeah. Can
The
I add something here? Sorry, I want to add something that's super important here. So I just heard you say, hey, I heard you say qualified business leader first and then a woman later, right? So it's not like you were lowering the bar for the qualified business leader. Like she needed to be a qualified business leader. And I actually want to top this with a personal story just because I don't think many people understand what it means, what inclusion truly means, right? As a woman of color in Silicon Valley, I've been in multiple situations. I think I've been a top rated employee at pretty much every company I work for, except for one. Okay. As a top rated employee at these companies, I literally would have the toughest time getting promoted. Like I was always a top rated employee, but I would not get the promotion. And some man who I felt was dumber than me would get the promotion. And I'm going to put it in like blunt words, right? And the man was usually white. And I was scratching my head and I was like, if I may use the word, I was like, how did this dumbass get promoted? Right? And when I hear a leader saying you have to be intentional, the intention is to me is not saying, oh, by the way, we're going to search for a woman. The intention is what are my internal biases where I might be discounting a person's qualifications, a person's skill set, a person's competence because I'm blind to the fact that I have sexism and racism within me. Would you agree with that analogy?
I totally agree. I
Okay.
totally agree. And the environment that we're operating in right now is one of the most preposterous environments that I've ever been in. And, we've gotten lots of feedback from people outside of the organization and that are customers of ours as well. And we're not forging a new path. We are forging the same path because we have always supported diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
And, it's just critically important right now that we hold the line, especially when there are organizations that are backpedaling away from those commitments. And only because there are people at the extremes that have louder voices than the ones that we're speaking to. And one of our commitments in 2025 has been to be a little bit more provocative and a lot louder in terms of supporting these efforts.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten the provocative piece covered. So if you need help there, I'm
Yeah, and
like,
if you need somebody to scream it loud, she's got you.
exactly, right? Like I'm like, I have nothing to lose at this point. So I'm just gonna go out and tell it like it is.
And I want you to know, on behalf of our entire team, how appreciative we are of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
The other story that I was going to share with you has a lot to do with the work that we're doing with nonprofit partners. And this, as you know, is an incredibly challenging environment given the cuts to USAID, and every single one of our nonprofit partners has suffered immensely as a result of those cuts. So one of the things that our partners have found so valuable is that we're not we're not encouraging any of our organizations to operate in silos. There's an organization that we have supported for a very long time that is led by a woman who was the former Miss Burkina Faso, Miss Africa, and became a very successful supermodel thereafter, and took all of that capital that she earned as a successful model on the global stage. And rather than serving herself, she started a nonprofit organization 10 years ago to serve her home country of Burkina Faso. That woman is Georgie Bedell. She is doing a number of things in West Africa. She is doing well water repair. She is building new wells. She's building what are these oases that are supporting local communities so that they have a community center and a garden and can access clean water at those oases. Most importantly, all of the work that's being done in Burkina Faso is being done by a group of women that are trained as engineers so that when a well breaks down, they hop on their motorcycle and they go out.
Oh, wow.
And we call them the badass women of Burkina Faso.
Oh my, like I'm getting goosebumps
I
right
know,
now.
that's such a
Right?
cool
Like, can
story.
you imagine not having access to clean water? Like, I'm on a podcast and I have this thing next to me because whatever 8 a.m. workout. I'm like, so
Yeah.
and how is that even? I mean, I came from India from very modest means, but I had drinking water, man. Like, I mean, otherwise, yeah. It's
Well,
like,
we all take it for granted. You know, you
yeah.
turn on the faucet, you have water. My biggest issue when I was growing up was getting yelled at for taking too long of a shower, right?
Mhm.
And you think about these people that are walking for miles and miles and miles every day, that's keeping them from going to school because they're bringing water back, clean water back to their household. The point that I wanted to make is that there is an intersection with the work of Georgie Bedell Foundation and one of our newer partners called the Fred Hollows Foundation that's working on almost every continent right now around the prevention of blindness as a result of trachoma, which is a bacteria that's found in unsafe water. So people in Africa and in other communities around the world are washing their faces with this contaminated water, and the eyelashes curl back in and end up scratching the cornea and then create cataracts, and these people go
Oh
blind.
my goodness.
So one of the most powerful things that we're working on right now is this intersection between the work of the Georgie Bedell Foundation and the work of the Fred Hollows Foundation, whereby we're getting these organizations together to actually talk about how we collaborate to stop at its source the main contributor to trachoma cases around the world. And that's powerful. We had also had the benefit of celebrating Jane Goodall's 90th birthday in Seattle last year. And we invited 30 philanthropists to the event at a good friend's home. And Jane sat at the front of the room on her 90th birthday on a bar stool talking about her life story. But she did that with the head of the National Parks Foundation. It was the first time that these guys had ever been on stage together for a conversation.
Wow.
And there's real power in that as well. And you can imagine for the 30 people that were in that room, that is of not just a memorable event, but where you're sitting there listening to this extraordinary work from one of the world's all-time leading conservationists in history, that could be a life-changing event.
I mean, I don't even know what to say to that, right? Like that is, I mean, when you look at your life and you're like, what were the meaningful events in my life? Like, I mean, events like this really stand out because otherwise, like I'm in Silicon Valley, and life here can very quickly become about how many stock options did you get and how much money did you make this year, and like, where was your vacation, and did you go on this Disney cruise versus the other? And it's like, I mean, this is so meaningful. Yes, Disney cruises are fun, but like, what if you now could take your children to listen to a world-renowned chimpanzee scholar, and then really have them listen to what she has to say? I mean,
Well,
wow.
there's an incredibly powerful intersection with all of this as well, and it doesn't mean that somebody shouldn't be taking a Disney cruise. They absolutely should.
Yeah,
But you think
totally.
about the work that even Disney is doing right now around conservation efforts, and they have a an exhibit down in Walt Disney World's Animal Kingdom that celebrates the work of Jane Goodall, right? And they give millions and millions of dollars away to some very worthwhile causes around the world around conservation. That's really, really
Yeah.
important. I want to share one other story with you that when
Yes.
we were down at the National Book Festival. We had dinner with some friends from California, and they ended up inviting their granddaughter to the National Book Festival, and she was very curious about, several children's authors that she followed and all. And this is an extraordinarily bright young girl. And we were sitting at dinner, and there were six of us and Bella. Bella is the granddaughter. And she kept looking across the table at me. And I was wearing a Jane Goodall sweatshirt. And finally, she got the courage. She leaned in and said, "Do you know Jane Goodall?" And I said proudly, "I did. I do." And she went on for the next 30 minutes talking about how Jane was this powerful inspiration in her life, and that she had written reports about Jane, and that she wanted to be a conservationist and maybe a veterinarian. And I only learned afterwards that this young girl had spent the previous number of months taking care of her ailing father, who was dying of cancer, and actually administering treatments for him. And listening to her talk about a role model for her and the resilience that she demonstrated through this entire process was just extraordinary. And I bring that up because we should all be emulating the work of Jane and these other impact icons, I'll call them, that are leading the way. We do this on the investment side of the work that we do too, because it's one thing for Newday to knock on the door of Amazon and talk to them about a change in their product packaging. It's a completely different thing if we do that with a Philippe Cousteau or somebody like a Jane Goodall.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm like tearing up at that just because my younger daughter wants to be an animal scientist. So when, with Jane's passing, I was slightly comforted by the fact that my young one had now a role model to look up to, and she wasn't going to be the first one to earn a PhD in animal science and go to the forests of Africa to do work, or even forests around the world. Like she's already been to two or three forests in India because that's her jam. Like that's what she loves, and yeah, she's also going to be a very successful businesswoman on the side. I'm going to just say that she's going to do the both and. So yeah, we're at time, Doug. So I'm going to ask you a last couple of questions, and then DT, I'll give you one. I'll give you the last closing conversation.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so at We Crush events, we truly believe that connection and ROI go together, right? like most salespeople will tell you that people buy from people they like. So, and it's to me, to us, it is surprising that events, people when they run out of funds, events are the first thing they'll cut, because I'm like, how are you making revenue otherwise? Right? Like, how are you getting in front of your customers, making relationships, and really, so can you talk about connection and ROI, and like how investing in connections really generates returns, and how has that worked out for Newday and even personally in your life?
Yeah, so there is never, ever, ever a replacement for in-person connections. And sadly, as we went through the COVID experience, we all got used to doing lots of virtual meetings. And that was important at the time. And as soon as we broke from COVID, we went back to our schedule of doing in-person events. And I can tell you, just, as a result of the work that we did in New York City last week, that when you put 10 women leaders on stage and you have an opportunity for those 10 women leaders to engage with the audience, not just in Q&A, but in a networking session afterwards, you're building relationships there that last in perpetuity. And for any one of us that were there, it was such a feeling, an exhilarated feeling, that you're bringing people together that care. And we get swarmed at the end of our events, and particularly from younger people that say, "You've given us the hope that we needed to have."
Yeah.
And um, it is so critically important today in a world that seems to be fracturing related to this idea of community. And all of us have a responsibility to do things differently than what we've done. And, a big piece of this for us is bringing our partners together too, because we get a lot more work done when they are working together as opposed to apart.
That's exactly right. Like, I mean, partner summits are one of my favorite things to do, because it's almost like you build resonance. And the thing is that for me, actually, Doug, I'm so optimistic about this, because most people who feel connection will never second guess the ROI of it. Only if you're a disconnected person, you can't understand the ROI. But like, once you've been through connection, you're like, okay, I get it. Like, I absolutely do. And DT, I'll let you wrap up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one last thing, and I'm sure you get asked this all the time, but I have to know, which I know you have a million organizations, not asking you to cherry pick, but which cause is closest to your heart?
Oh boy.
I know that's a tough one, but I want you to answer it.
So, well, let me address it this way. Okay. So, I grew up on the ocean back on the East Coast. I'm an avid diver, scuba diver. Um, I go on dive trips as often as I can. Um, and there is something about the undersea world that is unexplored and magnificent, because it hasn't been touched by human influence the same way that, land-based habitats have. And I mean, you can find those similar experiences when you get out into the rainforest. I had an opportunity to go back to Palau last year, which is over in Micronesia. And um, my aunt and my uncle used to live there, which is what brought me there originally. And they ran a resort over there. And it was a rainy day, and we were out at a dive called German Channel, which is very famous in Palau. And there were only four of us. So normally you have a dive boat that has, 10, 11, 12 people. But because it was raining so hard, it was just us. And we were down 30, 40 feet or so. And the dive master was rapping on his tank and pointed up, and there were 3 or 4 manta rays. Now, these have a wingspan of, 6 or 8 feet,
Yeah.
and they're circling in unison with one another around us.
Oh, wow.
And it was so ethereal, like I felt like I was in outer space. As they circled around a couple of times, went around us, even brushed up against us, and then took off. They were like spaceships.
Yeah.
And it was a memory that I will have forever. It was truly extraordinary. We do a lot of ocean health work as well, and a lot of ocean health work with organizations like Earth Echo, which is the Cousteau organization, and Blue Community Consortium. So it's a really, really important part of our work, but it doesn't lessen, all of the other
Yes.
the
Yeah.
impact pillars that we're focused on as well.
Thank you for sharing. That was a great story. You're a great storyteller, Doug.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, man. This is the first podcast I've cried on. I've done, I don't know, maybe like 50 at this time. And it's like, it's a first for sure. Doug, I want to thank you for this conversation. You've shown us that capital and conscious are not in conflict. They're the partners, right? And I want the listeners to go back. I mean, if Doug painted these vivid pictures of clean water in Africa or beautiful ocean diving habitats, that can be our everyday workplace. Like we can go to work feeling as fulfilled as that if we just paid attention, brought in awareness, built consciousness. So that's what I'm wishing for everyone, right? Like, how do you go to work and have that same feeling while you're doing your work because you're so fulfilled? So thank you.
That is so well said. And please, if you're looking for more information, go to causewayImpact.com.
Yes, please. And then if you have the $1,000 and you are serious about investing, like absolutely just go to Causeway, invest, and watch it grow. Don't touch it for the next 30 years. You'll do well. Okay. All right. Thank you, Doug. Thank you,
Dear
DT.
Daniel, thank
All
you.
right. It was lovely.
Wonderful
Yeah,
seeing
take care.
you.
Yes. Yeah. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to In Great Company. Subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who values strong business relationships. Until next time, stay connected and keep thriving.